Councillor Ward has sought leave of council, and also that Councillor Edwards had a wisdom tooth extracted, so he's unavailable this evening. Just to advise everyone that this meeting is recorded in accordance with Council's meeting governance rules. The meeting will also be live streamed. Confirmation of the minutes of May the 19th. Does somebody move that they be received, please? Councillor Berry, Councillor Dudzik. I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you, councillors. Any matters arising from the previous minutes, councillors? Okay, thank you. There any disclosure of conflict of interest on the business paper here tonight? Okay, thank you. First item is item 7.1, and we have 4 speakers to this item. The first speaker is Mrs. Sue Donnelly. Mr. Donnelly, are you available there, please? Hello, Mr. Donnelly. Oh, there you are. You're on mute at the moment. Mrs. Donnelly, you're on mute?
Yes.
Oh, that's better.
That's better.
Yes, thank you. This is in regards to item 7.1 on the business paper, and you're a supporter of the recommendation. So if you wish to give your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Blackwood, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jindarup. It's really the social hub of the town, and it's a place where people gather and meet, all ages, all clubs from kindergarten to gardening to aged. It's the point people go. It's also a point for information services and emergency services. These are just some of the things that may not be obvious, but last week when there was a total failure of communications, everyone knows to go to the post office, and where they received essential goods and updated information and could connect and work out strategies. So it provides essential services like the post office, and it's one of the reasons it needs to expand, because there's not even enough room for post boxes at the moment. It's the only shop in town where you can get something to eat and drink. It's also, surprisingly for its size, one of the 2 major employers in town, and you'd be surprised at how many local people it employs. For tourism, it's also a point of where people come to, and I think we're missing out on opportunities. Almost daily, people will come to Blackwood, come to Jindarup, go inside, find that there's nowhere to sit out of the weather, and if you know Blackwood weather, and they'll move on to Trentham. So, you know, Blackwood is absolutely missing out, and so is the Shire. And there's many groups that would like to come. One who's waiting until they can be seated, not only for the beautiful surroundings, but also for the history of the town. Now, I am very familiar with the council heritage study, and I applaud it, and I'm all for the keeping of the heritage streetscape. But I believe the previous application, which included about 2 metres extension of the veranda, was absolutely in keeping with the heritage of that particular building and of the streetscape, because there's photographs from the early 1890s which show that there was an extended veranda almost adjoining the next structure. So if anything, I believe it would have returned it to a more authentic state, a historical state. So I hope that the committee finds in agreement and support of this application. I believe it's been an overly onerous process for the owners, and that unnecessary hurdles have been put in place. I think we need to celebrate the fact that someone wants to run a business in Blackwood in the manner in which this is run, which is so much more than a post office or a giftware shop or a cafe. So thank you for your time, and we hope to see you in Blackwood soon.
Thank you, Mrs. Donnelly. Councillors, any questions of Mrs. Donnelly? No. Thank you, Mrs. Donnelly. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mrs. Carol Guthrie. Is Mrs. Guthrie available, please? Mrs. Guthrie? Oh, there you are. You're on mute there, Mrs. Guthrie. You're on mute. You're on mute. Still on mute. Still on mute. We can see you, but not hear you. Hello?
How's that?
That's better. That's
Good.
better. Much better. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Mrs.
you very
Guthrie. If
much.
you'd like to give your presentation, please.
I will. Thanks very much for letting me in to speak. But to begin with, we didn't buy the property that we're developing with any heritage overlays, and there are no heritage overlays now. In regard to our project, we did our homework. We knew what we could and what we couldn't do based on the known restrictions of building on that property. As you know, Blackwood has many challenges in getting any building done, and we planned our build to make the very, very best use of our land. In our first attempt to get some plans passed, we had objections from our neighbours, but we reworked our plans so that we could have the best outcome for everybody. And consequently, all of our objections were dropped. The plan that we built was simple, just to extend a few metres to the north and extend the veranda accordingly. And the build was planned to be in keeping with the era and was going to actually reinstate the footprint from around 1915. We also felt that a lot during the planning process, we addressed many of the issues that the historical architect brought our way. We addressed those issues with pictorial evidence. And we feel that this build should have been completed a long time ago. This planning process has caused us huge financial stress, such as increased architects' fees and other fees that are associated. It's used up all of the money that we had tagged to do the inside fit out of our business. I've taken down money for our superannuation to actually pay over it, and that was nearly a year and a half ago, because we thought there's only certain times that I can get it, and that I brought it down so that we would have the money to get started. And that money's been earning next to nothing that whole time. We should have by now been trading in a renovated premises. And I can't begin to figure out in dollar figures how much we have lost in terms of trading because this project has taken so long. In our plans, you'll see that there was an extra room planned out the back. And in our original plan, we were hoping that we would have enough space that we wouldn't need to build that. But now we've gone into a new compromise with the planners and the heritage architect, which increases back of house greatly, but doesn't increase front of house. And front of house is where you make your money. And we feel that while we've put that compromise in, we feel that the compromise is actually our sacrifice. The council needs to understand that the prolonged planning processes that often occur cause great stress and decisions impact on people's lives. And we are not operating a museum. We are trying to establish a successful business that the residents of Blackwood and the visitors and the Shire can benefit from. I would also like to point out that we are the only people in over 100 years who has been ready to actually invest thousands and thousands of dollars into building and infrastructure in our town city, in our little business hub. And there's not much of it there at the moment. Only people in 100 years. We feel that we should be encouraged and supported, not battered and discouraged. And there's some irony in this, because through this whole project, whilst the heritage issues have been the main obstacle, a friend of and a local historian and I, for the past 4 years, have been trying to set up another little offshoot business running from our particular business. And that business is heritage walks, for both walking heritage walks and also bus tours, which would keep our history and our heritage alive. So in closing, I've got 3 requests to put to council. 1, that you approve this project. 2, that we ask the council to support us rather than making this such a difficult and traumatic process. We would also ask that the council consider us for inclusion in the Blackwood Septic Program. Our neighbours next door, who have got a non-operating cafe, were supported by the installation of an alternative sewerage system that would gives greater capacity for the use of their land. We would ask you that perhaps we could be included in that process, because we would benefit greatly from the same support. I'm sorry if I'm coming over a little bit emotional, but I think you have to understand that this has been a really horrible, drawn-out process.
Thank you, Mrs. Guthrie. Thank you very much for your submission. Councillors, any questions of Mrs. Guthrie? Councillor Dudzik, please.
Mrs. Guthrie, have you seen the recommendation in the council papers, and were you happy with the recommendation in the council papers?
As I said, we've put other plans up prior to this. In the previous times, we've also offered different different compromises. It's the whole thing has taken so long that it's had an awful effect. Yes, we're willing to accept what's there. However, as I said before, it's going to be not yes, it will benefit us. Just, we can't wait any longer. We just have to get this project finished. If we wanted to, sometimes we feel that we'd like to go to VCAT with the whole thing, but we can't wait another 12 months to do that. So we are now happy to go with the submission, the planning proposal that we've put in. But I just want to point out to council that it's a bittersweet outcome for us, given everything that's happened over the duration of this process going ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Guthrie. Councillors, any other questions of Mrs. Guthrie? Councillor Tatchell, question, please.
My question's probably to officers, so if you'd like, I'll wait till the last speaker. If you like.
Okay, if you just hold your question. Thank you, Mrs. Guthrie. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Sorry if I've come across angry and annoyed, but
no,
yeah,
that's fine. That's okay. Thank you for your presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Martin Blake. Mr. Blake, are you available there, please?
Mr. Blake. Martin's not going to speak now. That's probably been now a joint statement from both of us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. The next speaker is Mr. Richard Blake, the applicant's representative, and I did note that Richard is from Archiworks Design. So Richard, are you there, please? Richard? I can see you. Can you hear? Oh. You're on mute there, Richard, please, if you could just unmute.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. The floor is yours, Mr. Blake.
Beg your pardon?
The floor is yours.
Look, I have nothing specific that I wish to address here. All I'm here for is to support my client and provide an opportunity if any of the councillors require any further clarity on issues pertaining to this submission.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Blake, please? No, thank you, Mr. Blake. Thank you for making yourself available to answer councillors' questions, but there's sort of no questions forthcoming from councillors. So,
no problem. Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Thank you. Councillor Tatchell, you had a question of officers, I believe. You just noted when Mr. Guthrie's presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I probably have 2 questions if one's related to the other, but
yes.
My first question is that having seen all the plans of this over 3 generations of plan, My first question is, did the council provide a demolition permit for the area that supposedly doesn't exist, or we can't build on now, or the people can't build on now? But did we provide a demolition permit sometime in the 80s for a building that was there? And I have seen the building because I went and sourced a film that was done in Blackwood in the 70s, a John Waters film, which is probably our era, Mr. Mayor.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Vintage.
Yeah, about that era. And there was this building sitting there that supposedly doesn't exist today. So my question is, did we provide a demolition permit to get rid of it, or did it not exist?
Mr. CEO or Mr. Bezuidenhout, could somebody provide a response to Councillor Tatchell's question about the building, please? Mr. Bezuidenhout?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not across the history of the site, so I can ask Mr. Lavelle, and if not, I'll take that on notice.
Okay.
So my second question is
Yes,
relating to
Councillor
that.
Tatchell.
On that basis, if that was proven, then we have an era issue here where the building could either be taken back pre-1915 to an era when it was one footprint, 1915 when it was another footprint, and the 70s when it was yet another footprint. So we have three different eras. Is it possible that this could be approved tonight? And then if that is proven, that an amendment could be made to go back to the original plan?
Mr. Bezuidenhout?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave the first question about a history for Mark. The second question is whether we can go back to the original proposal. That's always a possibility if council wants to do that. We'll have to then update the conditions and reference that original plan. But the outcome that's been reached is based on mutual conversation with the heritage advisor and the applicant. And that is our preference. It's also based on the heritage study that's been done and a detailed assessment of the heritage features of the building. So the outcome that we've agreed is, from our point of view, the better outcome. But there's always the option to go back to the original plans.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tatchell?
Yeah.
Mr. Lavelle? Mr. Lavelle?
Yes, I'll just through the first part of the question. So demolition in the 1980s would have had to been done through council. So council would have been the building surveyor, would have had to issue any approval for demolition. But as far as finding records, I suppose we'd have to take that on notice to find out if we could extract any historic records on that side. I think it was a side like garage structure that was built to the north.
Councillor Tatchell, supplementary question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So on the basis, if that was produced, I know we have a time frame issue here, but relative, if that was produced, is it possible to bring this back to council very, very quickly to allow the proponents to make an amendment, should it be, within the rules? And I understand that there's a compromise in order at present with our planning and the applicant. But should we be able to, should something be produced that allows the original application, I'd like to at least keep it open-ended in terms of an amendment if it's possible.
Through the
Mr. Lovell, please.
Through the chair, just to remind you, if there was so referring to the structure to the previous structure that was to the north of the existing building, which was built, of course, post 1915, where the original structure was constructed. The Heritage Advisor looked at that. The Heritage Advisor acknowledged when they went on site that a lot of the original features have been altered. So original veranda is not the original structure, and there have been a number of external and internal changes. So the Heritage Advisor was looking at the best compromise position, acknowledging that the building has had significant changes to its external fabric. And was aware of, that was pointed out by Mr. Blake during the on-site meeting with the Heritage Advisor about a structure to the north of the site. So it wouldn't change, in other words, it would not change the proposed recommendation that we've got before us.
Okay. Councillor Dudzik, you have a question there, please?
Through the Mayor, I'd like to ask, is it possible that this recommendation could be moved, but a clause put in that we reserve the right to bring it back to a future DAC, should the circumstances as Councillor Thatchell has outlined prove to be correct? Is it possible to include a clause like that into a recommendation, or is it not possible?
Mr. Bazudinhouder, Mr. Lovell, please. Hello? Mr. Bazudinhouder, Mr. Lovell, sorry.
So, Mr. Mayor, for you, can I just clarify? Is it giving a mandate to officers to do further changes, or is it bringing a report back to council? I'm not 100% sure.
Councillor Dudzik.
It would be to issue an approval now, but say that we would be open to further consideration to agree an alternative if what Councillor Thatchell has raised deemed to be correct.
Mr. Bazudinhouder, Mr. Lovell, then Councillor Tatchell has a question there, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say the flexibility would be that we have condition 1 requirements is to allow for condition 1 to be worded in a way that the applicant can submit updated plans, and then those updated plans can then be approved and decided under delegation.
Okay. Councillor Tatchell, you had your hand up there, please.
Yeah, that was my suggestion, that the quickest way to resolve that would be if it was done under delegation, they wouldn't have to wait for a meeting. And if they could come to another arrangement, well, they could do that purely by an amendment under delegation. So I like what Mr. Bazudinhouder said. I think that makes sense.
Councillors, we have to make sure that if that is the intent of council, we get the wording correct on condition 1, because we want to make sure that if that is the will of council, that condition or the wording is in fact exact and precise and doesn't sort of cause us problems going forward, and also for the applicant. So somebody wish to reframe condition 1 to take on board the discussion that's been had, please?
Mr. Mayor, can we cut and paste what Mr. Bazudinhouder said? Do you think?
Well, I think we can certainly get the intent of that, but we probably just need the wording to make sure that it does capture exactly. Councillor Dudzik, you had your hand up there, please.
Could we have can we move the recommendation that under item 1 put that we give approval for council officers to accept different plans under delegation? Is that okay?
Well, I'd take advice on that. Mr. Bazudinhouder, Mr. CEO, does that sort of satisfy the desire of council, but also to ensure that legally we make sure we cover that the applicant is quite clear what their options and obligations are?
Maybe if we simplify it, Mr. Mayor, and say that any amendments made over and above what's already there could be done under delegation, or any supplementary amendments be done under delegation.
I move what Councillor Thatchell just said.
Well, I'm in your hands, Councillor.
We better check it first. Thank you, Councillor Dudzik, but we better check it. So.
Mr. Mayor?
Sorry about that, Councillor. I just dropped out. So, Councillor Tatchell, you wanted to move that with a slight recommendation that what you were suggesting?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
And I'll second it.
Okay. Is everyone quite clear what those changes are? That it is to allow delegation of the officers to accept some changes to plans. Does that capture what people are suggesting?
Yep.
Yes, Mr.
Okay. Mayor. Okay. Is there any dissent? I'll put that, all those in favour. I'll move in a second. Sorry, I've got to move Councillor Tatchell and Councillor Dudzik. Sorry, I forgot. Councillor Dudzik, you seconded, I take it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Councillors, any dissent? I'll put that, all those in favour. If you could just please raise your hand. I'm sorry, we're sort of freezing up here at the moment. So, oh yeah, I see enough hands there. It is carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. The next item is item 7.2, and we have three presenters, three speakers rather to this. First speaker is Mr. Michael Tudball, who is a supporter of the recommendation. Mr. Tudball, are you available and online there, please? Mr. Tudball, you're on mute. You're on mute, Mr. Tudball. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Just got admitted in. Thanks very
Mr.
much.
Tudball, just when you're ready to put your presentation, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay, councillors?
Yep.
I think I'm frozen up here, councillors.
I think Tom's frozen.
Oh, I've got you, Tuddy.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, Tom, I think you're going to miss out. Anyway, thanks very much, Mayor, councillors and CEO. I'll keep it brief. I know you've got a big night. Council has the officers' report, and generally we're very happy to finally conclude this process. I did write to all councillors last week just to give a bit of background and context, and hopefully you received that email. We believe we've addressed all the objectives, legitimate concerns, and the planning and building requirements from Moorabool Planning Department. I'd just like to give a very quick background and then the two requests that we have, one of which is a slight error in the report. What we're building here, councillors, is 2 family homes for 3 generations of Tudballs. That's the emotive side of it. So it's for Vicky and I when we move back to Bacchus Marsh, and for our son, daughter and 9-month-old granddaughter. It's an over $1 million local development, and we think it's a very appropriate development for that area in Mattingley. It's a corner block. It is on a laneway, which seems to be the biggest issue, Peelman's Lane. If it was in George Street or Dixon Street or somewhere in the centre of town, I don't think we would have had the issues that we've had. But on the corner of Boys Close and Peelman's Lane, we believe it's a very appropriate development. It's going to be built by a 3rd generation Bacchus Marsh builder, the Cook family, Shane Cook Homes, and we believe it's the best development in the precinct. Now, you'd expect me to say that, being that it's ours, but anyone who knows Peelman's Lane, particularly the councillors that have been around for a while or been down that way, we believe it's the best development there, particularly Riverdale and some of those that run off Peelman's Lane. We don't think they've been the best developments that could have happened there. And the other thing is that we're very close to everything that Moorabool Shire sees as important for its community. Parks, roads, walking, trail, the big development that's going to happen at Mattingley Park with the indoor centre, the bowls club, etc. So we think it's quite appropriate. All we'd ask for a council is, number one, there's a slight error in the report. If I take you to condition 1 on page 23 of your documents, items 1B, C and D refer to unit 2. I think your officers will tell you, or should have told you, that it actually should be unit 1 that's referred to there. So it's the one that faces Boys Close. So that's just an anomaly in the report. What we would ask for is 1B that talks about reducing the upstairs by ½ metre. We don't believe that's reasonable. We don't believe there's any reasoning under Res Code, under Building Code, under the Planning Environment Act. We believe we've addressed the building articulation with significant landscaping, canopy trees, front fence permeability, a whole lot of other measures that council's asked for. So we would respectfully ask that we're very happy with all the other conditions, the pages of them. We just want to go ahead with this development, but that condition 1B be removed. Thanks very much, Mayor and councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Tudball. Are there any questions of Mr. Tudball, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Tudball. Thank you for your presentation, and council will take it into consideration. Councillors, that we have another speaker, Mr. Stuart Robinson, and Mr. Robinson is objecting to the recommendation. Mr. Robinson, are you available there, please? Mr. Robinson. Yes, you're on. Are you able to hear me? Mr. Robinson?
A bit like the Marconi Wireless.
Mr. Robinson, I'm not quite sure whether you're on mute or not. I don't know what. Can you hear me, please? Mr. Robinson?
It says he's connecting. I don't think he's connected.
No.
You can see him.
I can certainly see Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson, can you hear us? Okay. Give it a few minutes just in case this is going. Oh, connected. Mr. Robinson, you're on mute there, please. You're on mute. Mr. Robinson, you're on mute. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
better.
good. Right.
If you could just give your presentation, please.
Certainly. I'm speaking in relation to the plan of the subdivision at 9 Boys Court.
Yes.
The planning amendment from STYs are those of a professional city-based professional planning company that do not address the real situation in Peelmans Lane and Boys Close, Battingley. The corner block at the intersection of Peelmans Lane and Boys Close should not be subject to the structures the owners would like to be built, namely 2 townhouses. The original plans were not suitable, and the new plans are not in keeping with the corner site being 9 Boys Close. The constant mixing up of the names being street, lane and close in the submission from STYs gives one the impression of trying to dress a pig in new clothes. The design is not suitable due to 1, access to Peelmans Lane by the townhouses, the size of the structures within the location or the block on the corner of Peelmans Lane and Boys Close being a 9 Boys Close. When the relationship of the townhouses to Peelmans Lane is not appropriate and will be out of alignment with the general 4.5 metres setback of the existing buildings, houses and flats units in Peelmans Lane, being the north side of Peelmans Lane I'm talking about. The houses on the south side of Taverner Street are generally, well, the houses on the south side of Peelmans Lane generally go to Taverner Street, but that is not the point at the moment. We're talking about the north side of Peelmans Lane. The owners of 9 Boys Close purchased a property in Boys Close. It was on the corner of Peelmans Lane. However, they want to now go or build into Peelmans Lane. The STY's planning assessment appears to disregard this very important fact that Peelmans Lane was only an idea which may have been, the owners may have thought after they purchased the block. This should not be allowed to happen, in that the structures will be looking south because the front door looks south. They've planned a building with a front door looking south and they think they should have access to Peelmans Lane. Well, that should not be allowed to happen. The amended plans are no better than the original plans. The do STYs think Moorabool Shire Council and the planning section does not understand what they are being fooled and subjugated by a phony assessment. The assessment doesn't stand up. It's very similar to the original plans. The houses and structures within 35 metres of the proposed buildings on the corner of Peelmans Lane and Boys Close the 4 driveways adjacent to their property have no alternate driveways. It's made out that they do, perhaps, but anybody living in the area knows they don't, and it doesn't stand up. The assessment doesn't give the true situation that the ratepayers who live in Peelman's Lane understand. It also seems that the Boys Close is a major thoroughfare, when in fact it is a no-through road with very little traffic on it at all, whereas Peelman's Lane is the destination for all the people who live in Peelman's Lane. And enough is enough. The report from the traffic flow appears very suspect, and the information should be looked at again, and perhaps another report made by a separate company. STYs do not understand what type of area Peelman's Lane is. A narrow one-way street. Well, this is not correct. It is a narrow one-way lane. The words street lane have been mixed up to the benefit of the new plan, which doesn't hold water. The residents of Peelman's Lane ultimately end up at that corner. As I say again, enough is enough. If the new structures are south-facing, they should have a garden path, but not possibly the numerous vehicles and 2 double garages, which sounds great at this stage where we've got a family all living together. But what may happen in the future? The bringing together of vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists is not going to enhance efficient access from Peelman's Lane, as the amended report says. In summary, the plans involve structures that are not suitable to this block, even though the benefits to the owners are in line with a family. However, this is the fallacy of composition. What is good for one is not good for the whole community. The whole community and the MSC and the councillors and ratepayers should all be considered. Peelman's Lane has a history, and some of it is not good recently. Things are changing. Please don't prolong the situation with further incorrect decisions that do not benefit the councillors, ratepayers, or the Municipal Shire Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Councillors, any question of Mr. Robinson? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. An officer there? Someone? Okay. The next speaker is Mr. Trevor Crawford and Ms. Alicia Lorenzini. Are they available there, please? Oh, Councillor Berry has a hand up there. Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, Tom, that's okay. Let the speakers go. I'll ask my question at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you could just hold that. So, Ms. Lorenzini and Mr. Crawford, are you available there, please? So we're connecting to audio. So when that becomes on, you'll be ready to speak. You're on mute at the moment. Thank you. You're on mute.
Is that better?
That's better. You're on mute there for a second. Yes. So if you want to give your presentation, please. Thank you.
Are we going off this, or are we?
Just say what you want to say.
Our main concern was that it's our only light-facing windows on that side of the house. Well, we've only got the 2 bedrooms that face south, and then we've got our main living area and lounge rooms that face out to the east there. So our outlook is pretty much just that block. So we were just concerned about the
natural
the natural light, and that we're potentially going to be looking straight into a 2-story wall.
Okay. Is that sort of your main concern? Is there anything else you sort of wanted to raise there?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, apart from the actual drive, the 2 garages facing out onto Peelman's Lane, you know, that's adding to the congestion on Peelman's Lane, and basically directing like those cars having to come along Hillman's Lane where they're not actually part of Hillman's Lane sort of thing. So they should be going on to Boys Close.
Okay, thank you. Council, is there any question of Mr. Crawford and Ms. Lorenzini, please? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Council will certainly take that on board, and I appreciate your giving your presentation here this evening. Thank you very much for that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Councillor Berry, you have a hand up, obviously a question there.
Yeah, my question is to the officers. Where we've got 1B and that refers to Unit 2, I suppose that's got to be changed to Unit 1. However, my question read that is why do you think the floor needs to be recessed at 0.5 metres from the ground eastern front wall to allow for improved building articulation?
Mr. Mizudenhout and Mr. Lovell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can answer and then see if Mr. Lovell can add. I think first of all, it's Unit 1 faces the corner. It's a corner site. It's very prominent double-storey built form. When we look at neighbourhood character and the development and design overlay, it is standard practice to recess your upper floors to get articulation in your bolt form and to try and prevent shear walls, especially when it's highly visible from the public spaces. And in this instance, it's based on neighbourhood character and development and design overlay requirements to recess that upper floor to get that articulation, to build up the bright form and just to address that corner. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy for Mr. Lovell to add if he's got anything to add.
Okay, Mr. Lovell.
Yeah, so through the chair, similar thing, it's breaking up the shear wall element. So whenever you do a 2-storey structure, you do look for a recessed first floor. So in other words, the ground floor is larger than the first floor, and the first floor, the minute you articulate it, even if it is half a metre, it does create visually a reduced footprint. So you are reducing things such as visual bulk.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Councillor Berry, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dudzik, you have your hand up there, please. A question?
Yes. Would there actually be anything wrong with removing the point 1B regarding the recess? I know that it's a common thing that councils do, but is it an essential element that we do that? Can it be done without it?
Mr. Mizudenhout, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to get so my camera won't come on.
No, that's fine. We can hear you. So that's the important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I mean, we do want to get compliance with RES code as well as neighbourhood character statements. That's in our planning scheme as well as the design development overlay. So if we don't, we have to justify those exceptions. It's also the risk of creating a precedent to say, well, if you've allowed it on a very prominent corner where it's visible from the streetscape, I mean, it does set a precedent for future developments. And we do want to achieve good outcomes in terms of bolt form and design responses. So that was the reasons the officers put it forward. So if it's removed, we will just then end up with a different design response.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Dudzik?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, Council, of officers? Okay,
Paul's got his hand up. Paul's got his hand up.
Okay, doesn't appear on my screen. So, Councillor Tatchell, sorry about that. It's not.
No, that's all right. I was waving madly. Okay, Mr. Mayor, whilst it's commonplace for buildings that are on a corner block to have an entrance both in 2 streets, is there something that precludes it in this particular case, that we've got a double garage in both streets, or access in both streets? Is there something in our planning scheme that goes against that?
Mr. Mizudenhout and Mr. Lovell, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, in terms of the access arrangements, those were referred to our council's traffic engineers. They looked at it in very detail, did an assessment. The corner lot does present towards Boys Close, and it does create that interactive streetscape that you want. So it's not dominated by garages. But yeah, we did consider alternative layouts of the site, and the one that's proposed seems to be a good response. It also deals with off-site impacts. The minute you start changing the site layout, there's impacts of overlooking, overshadowing on adjoining properties. So the layout as is now seems to be very functional and high level of compliance with Res Code.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tatchell? Okay. Councillors,
thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have one more if I may.
Yes, certainly. Certainly, please do.
I have one more. Yeah,
yes.
Just on the overshadow, obviously there was an overshadow test done based on Mrs. Lauricini's testimony on the lighting to their window. I assume we did a shadow test on this.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I can get Mr. Lavelle to add to this, but
yes.
There is requirements of separation distances and setbacks from adjoining development. So if it's normally a double-story build form, you have to have a 9-meter setback to prevent overlooking and overshadowing. I haven't got a detailed shadow diagrams in front of me, but when reading the report, it's quite clear the only exceptions to Res Code were the areas of detailed design and build form that we addressed. So my understanding is that overshadowing and privacy requirements and standards were met.
And through the chair, I just probably just want to reiterate the shadow diagrams were submitted, so taken during the equinox. The shadow is cast actually to the southern side, so to the Peelman side of the site, so that actually affects their garage spaces and their small sort of side yards. It is not impacting on the adjacent properties either to the west or to the north.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you. My IT is not great here, so if you did have a question, please just sing out sometimes because I may miss your hand, so I apologise for that. Councillors, there is a recommendation there, and I think Mr. Pudwell and I think Councillor Berry raised the matter of the unit numbers. I think it was on condition 1. They sort of, so just to sort of note that if somebody moves the motion, that they sort of at least address that particular matter, so that we otherwise have to go back and get it amended. So, councillors, I'm in your hand. Councillor Dudzik, are you moving it?
Yeah, I would like to move the recommendation in the council papers, and I would like to remove item 1B, and I would change unit 2 in 1C and 1D to unit 1.
Councillors, we have a recommendation basically the same as on the business paper with the changes as outlined by Councillor Dudzik. Is there a seconder for that, please? Is there a seconder for that? As I said before, I can't see everyone on the screen. So if you are seconded, could you please list just yell out?
Yes, I will. Councillor Minari.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Minari. Is there any debate on that, Matt? On that alternate motion? I'll put that. All those in favour? Please put your hand up, councillors. Councillor Berry? Yep, okay, it is carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for that. Next item for discussion is item 7.3, use and development of a dwelling and ancillary buildings at 821 Green Hills Road, Blackwood. We have 3 speakers to this particular item, councillors. And the first speaker is Mr. Joshua Trowell. Mr. Trowell, are you available there, please? Mr. Trowell? Mr. Trowell, are you available, please? Mr. Trowell, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. No, you're back up. So if you could just, you represent the applicant's representative in this matter. So if you could please give your presentation. Thank you.
No problem. No, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Joshua Trowell. I'm a town planning consultant and I'm representing the permit applicant in relation to this planning permit application. So I've provided the committee with a written submission and I hope you've had the chance to have a brief look at it, in which case I'll just make a few key points and won't keep you too long. So this application, as you can see, is seeking to use and develop the subject site for the purpose of establishing a single dwelling on the property. My clients, Danny and Marie Laycock, are in their early 60s, have purchased this property to retire, and have a very keen interest for rural conservation and land rehabilitation. As per the officer's report, the proposed use and development accords with the purpose and decision guidelines that are set out in the Rural Conservation Zone. The proposal clearly demonstrates a use and development for the site that will be integrated with land management practices and ensure the protection and enhancement of the natural environment. The design of the proposed development will also satisfy the design objectives and decision guidelines that are set out in Schedule 2 to the design and development overlay. I note that the council officer has recommended a colour schedule in condition 1B of their recommendation, which we're happy to meet that. The proposed use and development has also adopted all of the relevant requirements that are set out in the bushfire management overlay, and we note that the CFA have supported our application subject to conditions. So the officer's report has also provided a well-rounded summary of the objections, and we generally support these responses. In our written submission, you'll also find some further comments in direct response to some of the concerns raised. One issue of contention you'll see in our written submission relates to the officer's recommendation for condition 1C, which is directing my clients to remove a kitchen in what we're calling the guest wing. The rationale for this appears to reflect a position by the officer that the current layout of the proposed development is for 2 dwellings. We respectfully want to emphasise with you that this isn't the case. Putting planning policy aside, as you'll see in our written submission, Danny and Marie really just want their kids to come and enjoy the property with them as often as possible, and to still keep their independence with their own young families when they come to stay with them. This is very clearly not a proposal to try and install a second dwelling on the site. Jumping back into planning policy, the planning scheme definition as to whether a building or part of a building constitutes a dwelling is not as black and white as whether it just has a kitchen sink, food preparation facilities, a bath, shower and a toilet. The definition goes beyond this, and it requires a proper and reasonable consideration as to how this building or part of a building is going to be actually used. This is a judgment call rather than something you can quantify with kitchens and bathrooms. Bear in mind that it's uncommon for many large houses these days to have a second kitchen or a kitchenette. You'll see in our written submission that I've made reference to a relevant VCAT decision, which generally supports this position. We say that the layout, design and siting of this guest wing is clearly going to be used in conjunction with the main residence, and it is not intended to be used as a separate self-contained dwelling. The guest wing shares the same roof line, and it's unlikely to even meet building regulations for a separate dwelling, bearing in mind that it'd probably need a fire-rated wall installed between the 2 structures. In addition, the guest wing also has no sense of address or separate access. Rather, it shares all of this with the main residence. The guest wing will also remain connected to the same water supply, power and septic as the main residence. So based on these facts, we say that there cannot be an independent or self-contained use of this guest wing, which would allow it to be defined as a second dwelling. Any such use would require additional infrastructure, structural changes, and that's just simply not the case with this application. So overall, we're supportive of the officer's recommendation, but we do respectfully request that this committee direct a variation and remove condition 1C. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Trail. Councillors, any questions of Mr. Trail? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and council will duly take those comments on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mr. Daniel Sullivan, who's an objector. Mr. Sullivan, are you there, please? Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Sullivan, are you?
He's connecting to audio, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Mr. Sullivan. Can you hear us? Oh, I'm still connecting, sorry. Okay. You're on mute there at the moment. You're on mute?
Yep.
If you could just please unmute.
Yep, unmuted.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
No, that's
Can you hear
fine.
me?
Yes, we can. If you could please continue with your presentation, please.
Okay, so contrary to the planning officer's term for our business as plant nursery, we are agritourism, combining nursery, open gardens, market gardens, and licensed restaurant. This proposed development adjacent to our business diminishes the tourism experience to our visitors by impacting visually on the natural, scenic, rural, non-urban environment. The provisions in the planning scheme for rural conservation are there to protect and uphold the non-urban, natural, scenic, and rural environment and protect existing agribusinesses like ours. The planning scheme for rural conservation is to conserve and enhance the cultural significance and character of open, rural and non-scenic, scenic non-urban landscapes, whether the dwelling will adversely affect the operation and expansion of adjoining and nearby agricultural uses. The dwelling needs to minimise any adverse impacts of siting, design, colours, height, bulk, and materials to be used. This proposed dwelling does not meet these requirements and is not compatible with the zoning for rural conservation. The Green Hills area is not zoned rural living, it is zoned rural conservation, and all the values and integrity of this unique zoning need to be upheld and protected at all costs. The issue of the dwelling being a dual occupancy dwelling has not been addressed by the planning officer by suggesting the removal of one of the two kitchens. Dual occupancy dwellings are prohibited in the planning scheme for rural conservation. The home once built could easily be converted to two dwellings by installing the second kitchen, and no one would ever know about it. The separate western wing of the dwelling needs to be removed from the plans to prevent the current or subsequent owners installing a second kitchen and forming two dwellings on the lot. New floor plans need to be submitted consistent with a single dwelling. The landscape management plan does not address the issue of the need for the dwelling to minimise any adverse impacts of siting, design, height, bulk, and materials to be used. It's double-storey, 40 metres in length, completely incompatible with the zoning for rural conservation. It is out of character with the area and the environment, and the applicant has provided nothing to help the building comply with the planning scheme. There is also a large shed as part of the planning application, which there are no drawings or elevations provided. The planning officer states in her report, in her opinion, and I quote, "The appropriate landscaping consistent with the landscape management plan will address all of these issues. This is an absurd claim and not backed up by any evidence." Yep, I'm a landscape architect. I don't think any amount of landscaping could help disguise this development. The building itself needs to do far more to help this development meet the provisions in the planning scheme for rural conservation and not rely heavily on only one other element to achieve this. I don't believe the planner, whilst writing this report, fully understands the unique provisions made in the planning scheme for zoning for rural conservation. If this development is allowed to go ahead in its current form, it will set a precedence for urbanisation of this area in contradiction to the planning scheme for rural conservation zone. This development does not meet the unique requirements of the planning scheme and should not be supported in its current form. I don't know if I can hold up that drawing. You can see the size and bulk of the...
It's just a bit blurry. Just move it back a little bit, might help. It's just sort of very blurry, that's all.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
That's all right. It's 40 metres long anyway, and it's it's completely inappropriate. So the development is unsympathetic to the surroundings, out of scale and character with the area, and will look like a doctor's clinic sitting on a hill. The protections or support are provided to small-scale artisan businesses like mine. There are no protections or support. Large-scale residential developments are encouraged above small business. I have one more item to address quickly. I have a letter from Western Water to Victoria Mack from last December. Western Water asked her for more information so that they could consider this development and finish their investigation.
Sorry, Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, we've just got a point of order on. I think we're in dangerous ground when we start mentioning the planner's name in regards to a letter. In consideration, we don't know what the content is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Mr. Sullivan, if you could just sort of refer to the item, but rather than the officer, if that's okay, please.
Oh, yes. So the letter was written to the Planning Department, Renewable Planning Department, by Western Water. They requested more information so that they could finish their investigation into this development. That information has never been provided. Western Water have not finished their investigation, have not consented to this development. And it does say in the planning officer's report that they've consented with conditions, and this is not true. It's a very important part of the planning process, Western Water, and this is all special water catchment zone here. So it's a very important part that's been overlooked and missed. So, and that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr. Sullivan? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and submission. Council will duly take those matters on board and in their deliberation. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillors, there is an item on the business paper, but we have been circulated an amended officer's recommendation. I think Mr. Bazudin, you may wish to. Oh, Councillor Minari has a hand up. Sorry, I should cut across that. Councillor Minari, you have your hand up there, please.
Yes, I just have a question for officers, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Could we have a clarification on the answer from planning to Western Water?
Mr. Bazudin here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask Mr. Lavelle, but we did refer it. We did get comments from Western Water, which we've now, as you correctly indicated, we've got a updated set of conditions for a proposed motion where we included those conditions. The conditions are very much the standard conditions they place on most of the similar developments in rural conservation or farming zone. In relation to the referral, I'll have to unfortunately refer that to Mr. Lavelle or take it on notice.
Okay. Mr. Lavelle, are you able to answer that or just have to take that one on notice, please?
Yes, so the Western Water were referred the application, and as I said, very late in the piece, as of yesterday, they did respond conditionally consenting to the proposal, so that there is no objection from Western Water as a Section 55 referral authority.
Thank you. Councillor Dudzik and then Councillor Tatchell, please. Councillor Dudzik.
Through the Mayor, I have a question for officers. Is it essential to remove the Western kitchen? Because as a layout for a home like this, I think it would actually be an asset. Is it an essential that this is removed?
Mr. Bazudin, Mr. Lovell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we look at this, when we did the assessment, the unit, the second part of the dwelling is separated by the garages. So on plan, it appeared that it is configured in a way that can potentially operate as a separate unit. It's got a separate access point, and it's not directly linked to the house. It's only linked via the double garage or the carport. And yeah, it's our view, and the planning scheme does not allow for it. So we obviously, our interpretation is that that can function as an independent unit, and that's why we imposed the condition. I'm happy for Mr. Lavelle to add if he's got anything to add to the assessment itself.
Yes, so through the chair, it was to remove one of the features
Yes,
from
Mr.
that,
Lavelle.
what's called that guest wing. So council officers decided to remove a kitchen. It could have been removal of a bathroom. So in other words, that guest wing would have some dependence on the primary residence, whether it be through kitchen, toilet, or bathroom or food preparation areas. So council officers made a decision to remove the kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Councillor Tatchell, you had your hand up there before. Can you still hear me, please?
Yeah, I can, Mr. Mayor. Mine's a very similar question, but when the applicant gave the presentation, he conceded that the second building or the guest wing wouldn't comply residentially and made mention that they would need a firewall. So my concern is that is there a different rule for a temporary residence in terms of a firewall? And yeah, the reality is that fires don't have access to your social calendar. So if people were to be staying in that, what we now call the guest section room or guest house, and it doesn't comply for normal residents, how could it possibly comply for temporary residents when it's a safety issue?
Mr. Bazunhout and Mr. Lovell, please.
So, Mr. Mayor, the temporary residence is a structure that's removable. The way this is designed, it's not a removable structure, and so it has got, in our view, the opportunity or the potential to be used and function as a separate dwelling. I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but yeah, the difference is a temporary dwelling is basically a removable structure, whilst this is a fixed permanent structure.
Would you like me to have another go, Mr. Mayor, and try and simplify
Councillor
it?
Tatchell, yeah, I don't think your question was answered to what you're referring to, but if you could, please.
When the applicant made his submission, he mentioned that it wouldn't comply as a residence because it didn't have a firewall. So the question is, why would it comply as a temporary residence without a firewall?
Yeah, I won't know. That's
Mr.
more a
Bazunhout?
question that's related to the building regulations requirements. So I'll, Mr. Lavelle may have the answer, but I'll have to get advice from our building surveyor.
Yeah, so through the chair, when the applicant's representative was talking about a firewall, when you have two dwellings, there are certain different building requirements compared to one dwelling. So one dwelling doesn't require internal firewalls, but when you've got two independent buildings, they have to have a firewall. So the issue with it is that they could potentially still have all those facilities in there, operated as a second dwelling, and it would also be non-compliant with the building regulations, but then they would be subject to enforcement. And of course, the council officer has been aware that it is being used as a second residence.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Tatchell, or do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. So what we're saying in the report, it's telling us it's going to be used as a guest house. It's been mentioned on more than one occasion, and we're saying it's not compliant, and that's what we're about to approve. Is that, or the recommendation is to approve? I'm confused as to something either complies or it doesn't.
Mr. Bazunhout, please, or Mr. Lovell.
So, Mr. Mayor, when we assessed it against the planning scheme requirements, and the way it's configured, and with the amenities, the kitchen and the bathroom facilities, it can technically operate as a standalone second dwelling. So our requirements was to remove that, to bring it in line with the requirements of the planning scheme. So that's the one. So if we accept the conditions put forward by the officers, then we're comfortable that it will be brought in line with the requirements of the planning scheme. They still need a building approval. So a building surveyor will do an assessment and determine whether what requirements is required or need to be imposed in terms of building approvals. So our assessment was done against the planning scheme requirements, and we interpreted council policy or planning scheme policy. And the view is that it can operate as 2 dwellings, and therefore we require those amendments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Mayor,
Masood.
can I have another go?
Okay, Councillor Tatchell, please.
I'm still confused, Mr. Mayor, because the report clearly says that it's a guest house. So are we talking, and yet we're saying it's not a second dwelling. So we either go to 1 dwelling or 2 dwellings, and it has to comply with one or the other. So I'm confused as to what the answer I just got was that yes, the house is compliant if they choose to use the guest house, as it's been stated in the report. It would have to comply with the building surveyor. But if we give approval, we're basically giving approval to 2 dwellings.
Yeah.
Mr. Masood,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if those facilities are removed, either the kitchen or the bathroom, then it cannot operate as a standalone independent unit. It would be dependent on facilities of the main building. So therefore it can't operate as a standalone individual dwelling. And that's why we require, then that will still be part of the single of a single development. And it will be dependent on the main dwelling or facilities in the main part of the building. I mean, so even if they put in guests, the guests will be reliant on those facilities in the main house, so it can be a guest facility, but it can't operate as a standalone independent facility then. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Masood. Councillors, as I was starting off to say before, we do have the alternate recommendation, which differs from the recommendation in the business paper, as it includes the conditions requested by Western Water. So just to make you aware that that is the case, and that would be if council were to proceed with this recommendation, that would be the one that would probably be would pick up on the requirements of Western Water. So councillors, I'm in your hands, please.
I'd be happy to move the alternative recommendation with the requirements of Western Water.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dudzik. That's the one that's been circulated, that's been recirculated, so thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berry, thank you. Is there any dissent? Councillor Tatchell, you're dissenting, so Councillor Dudzik, do you wish to open the debate, please?
This is a proposal which council officers have said is an acceptable proposal. It allows the development of a building and secondary building on a property which is needed by the owners of that property. And it sounds like it is a reasonable proposal in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Berry, you wish to speak as seconder to the motion, please?
Yes, thank you, through the Mayor. I'm okay with basically what Tonya said, but adding additionally I agree, taking out of either a bathroom or a kitchen doesn't allow for it to be a second dwelling, and also allowing that the second recommendation follows the Western Water notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Tatchell?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a complicated problem because one, we're saying it's not a second dwelling by taking out some components of the building, but then admitting that it's going to be used as a second dwelling without that componentry. My issue with this is that regardless of any of that, the fact that we have a different rule for a dwelling in terms of safety basically means that anybody can turn their garage, safety wall or no safety wall, into a temporary residence or guest house simply by taking the kitchen out and disregarding any of the safety aspects that go along with a permanent residence. And the issue, of course, in that particular area is it is fire prone. It is an area that comes under a bushfire overlay. I think that using technicalities is not a great way to mitigate risk. The reality is that this proposal with a guest house either needs to acknowledge that it's a guest house and build it to a specification that is safe for the people that are staying there, or not. And I go back to the original point that fires don't have access to your social calendar to see who's sleeping in the room. But the fact is, these rules are put in place for people's safety. Whether you have a kitchen or a bathroom in there is totally irrelevant if you're sleeping in there in a fire and you don't comply as a permanent resident. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Dudzik. Sorry, any other speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Dudzik, do you wish to close the debate, please?
This is a proposal which council officers have said meets requirements, and a bushfire management plan is being provided to ensure the safety of the occupants. So I put forward this motion to councillors to vote on.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, we've heard the debate. The debate is now closed. I'll put that, the motion that has been the alternate recommendation. I'll put that. All those in favour? It is carried. Thank you. The next item of business is item 7.4, which relates to a property at Corrie Lane, Mount Edgerton. Councillor Tatchell has circulated an alternate recommendation. I hope Councillor Tatchell can sort of hear me. So Councillor Tatchell, sorry, it's just you're frozen on the screen there. So I was just hoping that the alternate recommendation.
After last week, I'm still thawing out.
Very good.
Yeah, I have circulated.
That you has been circulated to all councillors. So do you wish to speak to that?
I'll keep it.
Or move it?
Yeah, look, I'd just rather move it if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly.
It's about consistency in Corrie Lane. So.
Okay. Councillors, we have a move of Councillor Tatchell to that alternate recommendation that has been circulated. Is there a seconder for that, please? Is there a seconder?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Sorry, yeah.
Ali's hand was up too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So if I don't respond, could you please just yell out, because they don't always appear on the screen. I apologise for that. We have a mover and a seconder for that. Is there any dissent? I'll put that. All those in favour? All those in favour? Thank you.
Yeah, we're right.
The alternate recommendation. The alternate recommendation is approved. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor,
the next item of business is item 7.
If there's a medal for a degree of difficulty, if there's a medal for a degree of difficulty in what you're trying to do there, I'll present it to you after the meeting. So.
Very good. Thank you for that, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillors, the next item of business, item 7.5, which relates to the use and development of licensed premises, building and works and signage and reduction of standard car parking at 60B Grant Street, Bacchus Marsh. We have a speaker to this item, Ms. Carly Myers. Is Ms. Myers available, please? Ms. Myers, are you online there, please, or connecting? Ms. Myers?
She's connecting to audio again, Tom.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
You can hear me. Thank you all for.
Thank you.
I don't really have a lot to say. I just wanted to make sure that I was here so that if you had any questions, I could answer them for you. But just a little background. The local tap room is a small family business for locals here in Bacchus Marsh. So it's my husband and my mother-in-law. It's very important to us that we support the community. We've already started building business relationships with local businesses. That's so important to us. We love living here, and we just think this could bring something different and worthwhile to the community. It's very important to us that it's understood that this isn't a pub. This isn't a place where people will go to drink copious amounts of beer. This is about trying the craft side of beer. So it's about a social place where you can come and try something new and have a bite with the fellow locals and hopefully also bring other people to the Shire. We've organised a brewer to create an opening brew if we can get through here, which will be brewed with Bacchus Marsh strawberries and promoted as such. And it's all about community, supporting locals and building our life here as well. So that's all I really have to say. But I just, as I said, I wanted to be here more so that if you had any questions, you could ask me.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Councillors, any questions of Ms. Myers? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Myers, and councillors will take on board your comments on that.
Thank you so
very
much. Thank you for your time.
Councillors, thank you. Councillors, we have a recommendation there, spread from page 170 to 173. So somebody wish to move it?
I would like to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Berry?
Second, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? It is carried. Thank you, councillors. The next item of business is updating trends and issues and other matters. So just a bit of an update. I think, Mr. Bezuidenhout, is there anything you wish to just update councillors on, please? Mr. Bezuidenhout? You're on mute, I think. No?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing. Just any update that you wish to.
No updates at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Next item is process forward any work program. Anything to report there?
No updates, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any update on VCAT decisions which have occurred in the last little while, Mr. Bezuidenhout?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to update that 101 Gisborne Road, which is the development on the corner of Gisborne Road and the freeway, the residential development, that's going to go to a compulsory conference tomorrow.
Okay.
So we've got legal representation. And then we've got 3 items that went to a hearing in June. Those were O'Donnell Street and Gordon, Davey Street and Darley, and Cameron's Road and Kamada. And all 3 of those, we are expecting VCAT decisions in the coming weeks. So we'll update councils on those as well.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions on that, councillors? Thank you. Councillors, are there any other business relating to DAC? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Our next meeting is on the 21st of July of 2021. And hopefully we can meet in person and avoid some of this IT issues that sort of plague us when we go down this path. But I think we've battled through. If nothing else, we're resilient at Moorabool, I can assure you of that. We sort of still get it done. So thank you very much, councillors, and thank you for your participation and your patience. Thank you, officers, for your presentations as well. And thank you all the presenters who presented here tonight. And I think we'll close